Michael Carr, thank you so much for joining us. 5 drinks or midnight, 5 questions, 5 drinks, midnight, whatever comes first.
I think midnight is closer for me than it is for you.
Yeah, either we got a lot of drinking to do in a short period of time, or...
Well, we got a great storm raging outside here, so, this is perfect for me.
I saw that. You guys are getting nailed really good. Like, it's really coming down.
Yeah. It's very early for us. We normally don't get our storms for another couple of months, but hey, it's 2020. So, there was even a Department of Agriculture warning today about the potato blight. And to be honest, we thought we dealt with that a century and a half ago,
Yeah, 2020, it just doesn't, whatever. It just keeps coming. I mean, yeah, New York had we had our first hurricane already. So, and we don't usually get that till, October, November. So, it's August and we got a hurricane already, so they
let's just get this year over with.
Yeah, so I want to redo. 2020 did not exist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, should we move on to our first question?
Yeah.
Excellent. What are we drinking?
Well, our first drink we're going to have is our Pearse 5 years old with our lemonade or our lemon fizzy drinky thingy. I forgot to say to get ice, but I got some ice. So in Pearse, we call this our Liberties Lemonade because our distillery is in the Liberties and there's lemon in it. And it is as simple as that. It's just really refreshing summer drink. As you can see, it's gone dark outside here, so we're having great fun for our summer here. We had 2 weeks at the start, and this it's just such a lovely drink. The 5-year-old is young, it's vibrant, it mixes well with the lemon, the zestiness comes through, but they balance each other out. It's just a really refreshing long drink. And something we kind of accidentally discovered, Connor accidentally discovered while trying to fish around for a nice long drink. And yeah, it suits us really well.
Well, cheers.
Cheers. Still very warm here. Well, warm. Not in American terms, but even tonight now it's about 20 degrees Celsius. So, a nice cold drink in a night like this, even if it is a storm outside.
All right. So on to question 1.
Yeah.
How does a guy that studied environmental chemistry get into the whiskey business?
Mostly by avoiding environmental chemistry completely. When I left college, I worked in the industry for a couple of years, and it wasn't something I enjoyed immensely. I was literally in a lab in a fume hood. It was very repetitive. It was just very, very boring. I just found it took the life out of me. And to pay for college and to put myself through college, I worked in bars. I started collecting glasses in bars when I was 16. It's kind of it's the family game apart from soldiering. My family would be soldiers. I obviously didn't. But while my grandfather and my father were soldiers, they were also both barmen. So I got into it very early. Loved it. Absolutely loved the interactions. I grew up, as a person behind the bar. Learned so much about myself. So when it came to kind of deciding what I wanted to do with life, I realized that working in a lab with goggles and face masks and all the things that we have to wear now wasn't something I really wanted to do. So I kind of went back working behind bars. I traveled. I worked behind bars in New York, worked behind bars in Vietnam. I worked behind bars wherever I could get work behind bars, and I kind of kept doing that till I had a lease on a bar 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when the financial crash came, and it just didn't work out. So I had a friend who worked in Dublin Airport and said, "Hey, you're always talking about whiskey. Why don't you apply for one of the whiskey jobs in there?" And I was like, "Sure, I know nothing about whiskey." And luckily enough, the person who was interviewing me knew less than I did. And I convinced them in the interview that I was a good person, and I went in there as a whiskey ambassador with just an amazing team of people. And to be fair to Dublin Airport, the training we got was unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And it really set me up for, at the age of 30, figuring out, ooh, this is a career. I went from there. I was headhunted by Irish distillers, and I worked as a brand developer on Jameson and a few different brands. But my passion was always Powers when I was there. I left there to run the Irish Whiskey Museum as a manager there, and then I left the Whiskey Museum to work as Powers brand ambassador. And then the opportunity to come to join Pearse nearly a year ago, and I had to jump on it because, again, just to work with the likes of Connor, who you had on a few weeks ago, the distillers we have, Martin and John, James in the distillery, the sales team, like unbelievable people. And then just coming from the top, Mark Lyons, it's all about creation, innovation. Try, see what you can do. If it don't work, try again. And it's just an amazing place. So yeah, that's how I got into whiskey. It was a winding road. It took 10 years to figure out that this was my dream job and my future. And of course, I had the beard already, so it was kind of...
there you go. You're already one requirement in. So you're
one of the two, basically.
Yeah.
I just love this drink.
Oh, it's so good.
And when Connor said it to me, I was like, "Are you sure?" You know, I just couldn't see where the flavors match, but
yeah,
it's just lovely.
I was a little off-put myself because when you said like go get lemon soda, I was like, "You mean like I thought like maybe you meant like seltzer," and you're like, "No, lemon soda," and I was like, "All right." So
I know it's one of those. I suppose in our industry, in the whiskey industry, there's so many purists, and I respect them. It's amazing, and like we're not really gonna mix anything after this. And when a whiskey is mixed with something, it's seen maybe as denigrating towards the whiskey, which that 5-year-old is an absolutely stonking whiskey.
Dr. Stock Photography here again. The word stonking is an English word that's used to emphasize something remarkable, exciting, or very large.
Absolutely stonking whiskey. And for us, it was very hard to actually tell people, you know what, our stonking whiskey goes really well with a lemon soda. But it does. It works. It's brilliant. And it's like where all great long drinks, cocktails and stuff came from. In most cases, especially at the start, they were accidental. You know, when I started drinking whiskey and tasting whiskey in Ireland, really your only malt was Bushmills. Actually, it really was. And actually, this will lead us on to maybe our second whiskey. Because when I started working behind the bar in Mullingar, my hometown, which is right in the heart of Ireland, right in the centre, the owner of that bar, Anthony Hughes, he had a kind of policy of a Saturday night. At the end of the night, everybody was allowed to have a drink, but we were allowed to have 2 drinks. And we were only a small little bar. You know, we were trying to get to the nightclub. But if you wanted to have a pint of something, so a pint of Guinness, a pint of whatever you wanted, you had to have something else first off the back bar. And you had to kind of talk about it for a few minutes. So I seen a bottle of our Loch's 8-year-old. And I said, right, I'm going to have that on Saturday. I have to educate myself on it. And that's how I started reading about whiskey. And I read like books by Michael Jackson on Irish whiskey. I read The Lost Distilleries of Ireland, which is, for me, like I'm a weirdo who likes creeping around graveyards and old buildings and stuff like that. So The Lost Distilleries of Ireland is just a hit list. And in the early 2000s, wandering around these old industrial complexes and trying to explain to some security guard that you're mad into whiskey, basically with a beard like this, they just think you're homeless. So yeah, it's fabulous. And then when I walk into work, and I'm lucky enough to get to go to our distillery 2 or 3 times a week, even if I'm just flying in and out. The guys that work there are all historians, our guides are all historians. So every time I walk in, they're asking me questions and I'm asking them questions. And my 5-minute visit turns into a 45-minute visit. And then I have to avoid the distillers because at the moment they're doing crazy stuff with different mash bills and stuff. And I'm just, if I go in and start asking questions there, I may sit down and stay, and that's the end of it. So it's a fabulous place to work.
That's amazing. I like that idea that if you get to have 2 drinks and you get, but you got to talk about it. That's a really great freaking way, like just to get people interested in what you're drinking. And
totally. And from the owner's perspective, it was very much a way of selling the back bar, because he probably had more drinks than most pubs in my hometown. He might have had 15 Irish whiskies back then, where most pubs would have had Jameson, Paddy, Powers. That would have been it. Where he would have had Loch's 8-year-old, he might have had Kilbeggan, Tyrconnell, he might have had the Bushmills, Black Bush. He had 10-year-old Bushmills, which was crazy. It was super premium. He had a couple of bottles of Middleton. That was the one I wanted to talk about, but I wasn't let. But it was even like he always had 4 or 5 rums, a couple of tequilas. We didn't know what tequila was. He always had stuff like that. So the staff kind of ended up educating themselves. And actually, looking back now, I think everybody who started back then with me is still in the industry.
Excellent. Well, that question 1, super easy. Great story, great origin. So cheers. All right. So should we move on to drink 2, question 2?
Yes, go for it.
All right. What are we drinking?
So let's do the Loch's 8-year-old, since I was just talking about it.
Excellent.
I have a very weird little bottle of it because it's gone, man. It's gone. I thought I could get a bottle. I went into Celtic. Oh yeah, no problem. So I had to hunt down. I had to go to one of my bartender friends and said, "Can you give me 2 shots of Loch's 8-year-old?" And I gave him a little plastic bottle. He says, "I'm not putting it in that because it's a good whiskey."
Yeah.
So I had to go out and get my little cocktail kit and put it into my.
Your bitters. That's crazy. Wow, that's.
I don't want to open it now.
Yeah, no, I'm like, oh shit. But all right, so. Oh. Put that in there. Also, I've been told I'd be a very piss poor barman because I have a heavy hand. So I always.
That's not a poor. That depends on which side of the bar you're standing on, my friend.
That's right. Well, cheers to you, my friend.
Cheers.
Oh, that smells good.
I always tell people I'm not a fan of peated malt, and then people ask me to list my top 5 favorite whiskies, and this is always in it. And it's very subtle. The peating is very subtle. But it's an absolutely beautiful whiskey.
I'm right there with you. I'm not a big fan of the peated either, and like honestly, I did not know anything about this, and when you mentioned it, I had to go around and ask everybody where, like, how I got some. So like it was very much, but I had no idea what this was, and the nose is amazing.
Yeah, consistently since Cooley started, this is just, for me, it's always been their best whiskey. And even the older, and they do have astonishing older malts. They really do have brilliant older malts. But this whiskey has not changed in 25 years.
Oh, this is amazing. This is so good.
The original distillery, the Locks Distillery, is very close to my hometown in Kilbeggan, and it's an absolutely brilliant place. I would say it's almost exactly the opposite of our distillery in Pearse Lyons, in that Pearse Lyons is a beautiful modern distillery in a beautiful building, where the Kilbeggan distillery is a proper ancient distillery, 1757, in an ancient building in a lovely village. It's just one of those places that when you go in, you walk in the door, because the water wheel is still in use, the whole building has this heartbeat. It's not designed for tourists in any way, shape or form. It's a very easy place to bang your head or trip up. They don't use the original distillery for distilling anymore. They stopped in about 1957, but they do have a distillery out the back, which makes a certain amount of spirit for their Kilbeggan blends and stuff like that. I wouldn't know too much specifically about the whiskies, but the Locks 8-year-old, the reason it's peated is because Kilbeggan is in the middle of a bog, and basically peat would have been the fuel that was used to not only dry the barley, but for the furnaces, for the heating. And actually, even I spent every summer of my life till about 10 years ago out in the bog harvesting turf for our heating at home in my parents' place. So it's a whiskey that's kind of close to my heart.
No, thank you, because I would never have even noticed this bottle, and this is really just amazing.
When I did work in Dublin Airport, the Cooley whiskey guru used to come into us, and he'd obviously be kind of talking up the Connemara's, the Kilbeggans, the Tyrconnells, but this was always the one I wanted to talk to him about, and he was brilliant. He'd be like, Nick, let me sell my stuff, and then me and you are going to sit down and have a whiskey. Obviously not at work, but it was brilliant, because it is the kind of it's a kind of a secret whiskey. And actually, I remember one of the first times I ever talked to Barry Crockett, and I told him where I was from, and he was like, oh, sure, that's beside Kilbeggan. And we actually ended up talking about this whiskey, and it's a whiskey he had a huge amount of time for, really loved it. It was almost the opposite of everything that's produced in Middleton, in that, it was a single malt, there was the peated, and at the time, I suppose, Middleton was very much pot still and, clean kind of whiskies. And I know with the pilot distillery down there now, they're doing so many innovations, but back then it was kind of the opposite. And I think that's what Barry loved about it. It was just like, they're doing something really special. And the master distiller at the time in Cooley, Noel Sweeney, who's with Powers Court now, is an absolute genius. Like, I've never tasted a bad Cooley whiskey, a bad whiskey that has the Cooley name on it or the Teeling's name on it. I've never tasted a bad one.
I'm very jealous. You got to talk to Barry Crockett. I only got to shake his hand once, and I think he got a restraining order that next day, because
I have to say, I've had the pleasure of being in his company many times with, and he is, like, when we talk about legends, he's not just a legend. He's one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. He's passionate about his whiskey. He's passionate about his steam engines. There's another reason he loves Kilbeggan. They have an original steam engine that works. He's passionate about the industry. His story is fascinating. His family are fascinating. He would have worked with Dr. Lyons as well back in the day in Middleton. So, he's just one of those people my favourite line of his was, we were at an event in Galway, and they had the full collection of Middleton. His name was on every bottle, and Brian's name was on a few bottles. Barry was It was very busy. It was a fabulous event. It was really, really good. And I was, as the Powers guy, I was kind of just there to help out. I wasn't talking or anything. And as the night kind of progressed, and Barry is a very sprightly man, but he was getting tired. So I said, Barry, do you want to go for a pint, or do you want to head off? And he said, well, sure, we'll go for a quick pint. Sorry, whiskey. So we went across to a lovely little pub in Galway, across the road, a quiet place now, and we went in and sat down, and we just had 2 pints of Beamish, because Barry's from Cork, he only drinks the Beamish, doesn't drink Guinness. And I was just saying to him, I says, it must be fabulous to see. Sorry, the wind is rattling behind me here. I don't know if you can hear it.
Don't hear it, but you're good.
That's okay. And I said, it must be amazing to see your name in all those bottles, you know, and they're going to be there forever. And he turned around to me and he goes, Mick, I didn't make it to look at it. And that was, after that, I was just like, this guy, I'm gonna make an altar to him of empty Middleton bottles.
I let me know if you need help, because I will do the same.
We'll form our own little religious organization.
I will tell you, hands down, I think that Middleton Barry Crockett is my favorite Irish whiskey, number one.
It's astonishing.
It's not even favorite Irish whiskey. It's my favorite whiskey. Like that is like my number one thing. Like it just, yeah. Like it.
I find it very hard to argue with that. And the makeup of the whiskey is just crazy. You know, there's whiskey that's absolutely ancient, and there's whiskey that's quite young in it. It's all about the flavour, and there's no ego in that whiskey at all, except that his name is on the bottle.
Yes. And his face, and he hates it. So like that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Let's get to question 2.
Yeah.
Just because you know, I'm already on my second pour of this because it's fucking amazing. But you are known as the expert of Old Dublin and whiskey. Is there a good old whiskey story that you can tell us?
What I like to do, I love to take a walk around Dublin with people, and again just visit, you know, some of the let's say lesser known whiskey haunts. I suppose it's a very simple one. So the Thomas House in Dublin, it's an absolutely brilliant rockabilly kind of punk bar venue, but it's right beside the old John's Lane distillery, and it's on Thomas Street, just down from our distillery in Pearse Lyons. And the 3 guys in there would have been big fans of Pearse whiskey for no other reason than flavour. Literally no other reason. The guys didn't bother educate themselves on them. They just liked the stuff. It was as simple as that. So I was in talking to them, and I was chatting about the Dublin Fire Brigade and the fact that the Powers Fire Brigade were involved in 1916. They actually saved one of the big hospitals in Dublin and all this kind of thing. And Kevin Kelly, who's one of the owners, turned around to me and goes, my mother told me some story about my uncle or my granduncle. I don't know. So he rang her. Turns out his granduncle was one of those firemen.
Oh, no way.
That worked in Powers, that it was such a badge of honour to be a Powers fireman that the chief executive of Powers was a fireman. And I just loved the fact that I could walk into a bar that he took over 10 years before, tell him the start of a story about a fire service in a whiskey distillery, because that has nothing to do with anything, and for him to turn around, ring his ma, and get to flesh it out with people. And that's just, for me, that's what whiskey in Dublin is all about. Just because Powers stopped distilling in 1976, that didn't stop whiskey in Dublin. And now that, you know, Teeling started up, we started up, Liberties are there, I think Still Garden are just after opening. There's loads of distilleries opening up in Dublin. The story didn't stop. There wasn't a gap from 1976 until whenever Teeling's opened, there wasn't a gap. There was still people living the story. There was still the bottling hall out in Fox and Geese where Irish distillers have their bottling hall. There was still people who were involved in that. And so what I love is when you walk around and you start talking to people, and like you said, there is always a story. Every time I walk around Dublin with people, we find a different part of that story, and that's the most beautiful thing for me. So yeah, that would be my Dublin story, is the stories I haven't found yet.
Excellent. No, and also I look forward to someday hopefully walking around Dublin with you. So like,
it'd be my pleasure, genuinely. I've already a long list of bars. We might have to split it up for 2 days, maybe 3.
Sounds terrible. I don't know, like that just.
So I think I'd like to try next the Writer's Tears.
Love this. I fell in love with this in Galway, so this was.
Well, that's perfect for writers. It's an astonishing whiskey.
Love this stuff. All right.
But I love the, like, a lot of old bars, especially where I'm from down the country. A lot of old bars would have not been just bars, to be post offices or to be grocery stores. A lot of, like, there's Connolly's in Sligo. If you ever go into there, it was, you can see where the grocery store was at the front and the back, because there was streets on each end and the bar was in the middle. An awful lot of bars were undertakers. Very handy. Still a big tradition in my hometown. Our family undertaker, the gentleman who looks after us, it's a complete service, you know, for before and after. It's absolutely wonderful. So I love that about Irish bars.
Excellent. Well, cheers.
Cheers. Oh my God. I've forgotten how good this is.
It's amazing. This is just.
When I worked in the airport, this company, Walsh's, were a company that I think everybody in the airport really liked. They were very open. They told us exactly what was in the bottle, where they were sourcing it, the ages. They were very sweet. They were very good with training. And this whiskey I just fell in love with. And I think this is maybe, I always was a fan of Pearse whiskey. I was always a fan of Blackbush. They were my two kind of whiskies I really loved. And then I suppose when I started doing my training in the airport, I fell in love with Bushmill 16, because there's something wrong with you if you don't love Bushmill 16. And then I found this, and this whiskey is like a combination. You have your pot still and you have your malt, and it is from the two different distilleries. But there's no messing around again with casks. This is, now they do have beautiful cask finishes, but this is all bourbon cask as far as I know, and it's just an absolutely brilliant whiskey. You know, an absolutely brilliant whiskey.
Oh,
totally. Everything that's good about Irish whiskey is in the glass here.
Oh yeah, it's just amazing. Yeah. Oh, it can't go wrong. Like, that is just, oh.
Yeah. It was also, I think, the first brand to kind of get a bit funky with their packaging and to be non-traditional, which was great, you know, and like everybody followed, but they've set the standard, and like, again, just a beautiful whiskey, beautiful bottle, you know.
Absolutely. Their cask strength was like a puzzle, because it was like literally, they had the wood frame and then the cardboard you pulled out, and then you had to like maneuver it just to get. But yeah, like I
remember the first cask strength I tasted, probably 2012 or 2013, and just like, I was astonished, because I just tasted a Redbreast cask strength as well, which is, again, spectacular whiskey. I was astonished by the Writer's Tears cask strength. It was the first cask strength of anything, like the first very strong alcohol I'd ever tasted that had virtually no bang of alcohol. It was all those, it was nutty, it was woody, it had that fabulous spice coming through, and then at the back of it you were kind of like, my toes are tender, you know.
Absolutely. Like that isn't that like the good whiskey though? Like there's something that just like makes you all tingly inside.
Oh yes. Oh totally, yeah.
All right. So question 3
Okay.
comes from one of our mutual friends. I won't say his name. But and again,
Is he slightly balding?
maybe
And more than slightly balding and fake ginger?
maybe. And again, I don't really fully understand this question, but what
I'm
is
worried now.
what is your favorite whiskey on job interviews?
I think I know what he means. On job interviews. In the interview in Dublin Airport, I was asked what is the difference between Irish and Scotch whiskey, and basically I started a lecture at the poor lady who was interviewing me about how Irish whiskey was about stories and about these epic stories that covered the world, and that Scotch whiskey was much more local. And like one is not better than the other, just different. And the lady in the interview was kind of surprised because Irish whiskey is much smaller than Scotch whiskey. But what I went on to explain basically was that Irish whiskey is the story of a people traveling around the world, where Scotch whiskey is the story of a village going to London. And that was basically, I think that's what he was implying.
Right.
If there was anything else, it like we said at the time, what happens in Dingle stays in Dingle.
Well, there we go. Well, excellent. Cheers to that. That's our question 3. So, super easy. I was like, drinking during a job interview? Like that? I mean, that again, you guys have.
Oh, actually, now that you say that, yeah, okay. So no, I'm not going to answer that question actually in the way he wants me to answer it. Like, go back to the other one, edit that last bit out. No, you don't have to. Oh. But I do know what he's referring to, and he can go fuck himself.
On the question 4, drink 4. What are we drinking?
I think we're going to go as a development from Writer's Tears. We'll go on to the Pearse 1817.
Been waiting to crack this one.
Have you tried it before?
I have not.
Oh.
I love Powers.
Well, this for me is, there's a dichotomy in this whiskey in that it's both the ultimate expression of Powers for me and also so different. It's all bourbon cask. There's no messing around. As much as I adore John's Lane, and I adore John's Lane, but there's a sherry cask influence there, and that is not traditional for Pearse at all. You know, that's fine. Like, you know, whiskey has to move on and grow and stuff like that, and John's Lane is an absolutely stonking whiskey. But this whiskey manages to achieve so many different notes on the nose, so many different flavors on the palate without resorting to exotic barrels. It's all about the bourbon cask on this. First fill, second fill bourbon.
Oh, this
you get that big, rich, like the nose on it is almost like toffee or.
Yeah, I'm getting so much sweet. Yeah. So,
but there's fruit in there, but there shouldn't be. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's big. Absolutely. It's a luscious kind of nose.
Oh, that's amazing.
It really is, and I'm like, do you remember when we were talking there, and you were just saying like you remember the first time you tasted your whiskey? I remember the first time I tasted this, which was standing in the offices in Simmons Court, and just being like standing in front of at the time the head of Powers International, and just going, "Good Lord, this is spectacular," and him looking at me, kind of going, "Really? You really like it?" Because a lot of the guys weren't big whiskey heads. They were marketing people, and now they all became whiskey heads, believe you me.
Again, I think it is what it is, kind of.
Yeah. It's not complex. The nose is not complex on it, and I hate that word anyway when it comes to whiskey. It's big, it's luscious, it's round, it's happy, it's fruity, it's sweet.
Oh, right there with you. Yeah, absolutely. It's just glorious fucking whiskey. Like, it literally.
Like that spice that is so Powers, that is so unique to Powers, that is in other whiskies from the same distillery. But when you taste Powers going back to the 1950s, that spice, I was lucky enough, I have been lucky enough to taste old Powers, old Jameson, old Paddy, old Bushmills. And Powers has always had that spice. That it's just tingling away on the tip of the tongue. It's almost like you're after having an Indian meal, which sounds so weird, but
No, I'm right there with you. Like, it is. It's like you get the curry, but it's like the sweetness of the curry. Like, it's not hot. It's not spicy.
No.
It's the sweetness. Like, you're afterwards. Like, you just hit like the naan. Like, you dipped into the naan bread. Like, you took naan and dipped it into your curry. Like, that's what you're getting. Like, you're getting that. Oh,
I when we were talking about Barry Crockett, the whiskey, and I do think it is one of the most astonishing Irish whiskies ever made. I put this in that category.
Oh.
For a whiskey that was sold at maybe €75 a bottle, I think it's an astonishing whiskey, and I was so proud to be involved with this whiskey from every perspective, because the vintners that from 1817. If you ever get the chance to go visit the old Pearse distillery in Johns Lane, the main grain store has a big 1817 wind vane on it. The way we sold it was very specifically to, most of the pubs were very old-fashioned kind of pubs, so they were getting something really special that, like most companies, and understandably market to high volume, blah blah blah. And this was much more about the guy who walks in and goes, I'll have a gold label or a pint of stout and a gold label, and the barman goes, well, you know what, we've a really interesting Powers, do you want to try it? And I thought, and we did that with the single cask as well, and I just think they just knocked it out of the park with this whiskey.
Yeah, this is just fabulous. Like, this is just amazing. Like, I mean, when you recommended it, I was just like, I'm down. So, like, wherever, and it's been sitting on the shelf waiting. So this is amazing.
I love that. That is this bottle now I've had for a while. Keep it in my little cabinet down here with my bottle of Barry Crockett. Literally,
there you go.
It's down there. It doesn't come out very often because there's not too many left. And this was actually a gift after I left Powers. This was a gift from Chris, who we were talking about earlier on. He looked after me with that. It's just one of those whiskies that has everything. The nose is spectacular. On the palate, it's spectacular. The finish just goes on and on and on and changes. It's a chameleon of a whiskey.
So, on to question 4 then.
Yep.
What is your favorite Irish whiskey story?
My favorite Irish whiskey story. So, it's not even a story, it's just a moment. We've our national broadcaster here, the RTE, and they have their archives on their website. I think they're accessible from the States. And they have a brilliant piece on Johns Lane Distillery. And it's just lovely, and it's very, it's very 1970s Ireland, and even the presenter is like Ireland, it's very, very posh, very middle class, but the boys, Yeah, they go through a lot of stuff. It's about I'll send it to you. It's about 14 or 15 minutes long. It's really, really good and really beautiful. Just beautifully shot. And you see, like, I love one of the most beautiful things about Pearse was that they cultivated on the roofs of the warehouses, the flat roofs. They cultivated food for the staff and stuff like that. It was just amazing, right? But in the shot, the camera kind of pans, and the boys are all shoveling out the grist out of one of the big containers. But they obviously were told it was a camera crew coming, because they all wore very shiny boxer shorts, because they're wearing nothing else but shiny boxer shorts. So every time I show that video to people, I was like, here's the money shot, lads. So it's my favourite moment. And then there's one other on the same thing, on the RT Archives. Oh God, I'm going to forget his name now, but one of the famous Irish writers, he had a pub in Kerry, and he wrote a poem about the sound of whiskey in a glass. And whatever way they recorded it in the 1960s, as he's pouring the whiskey into the glass, it makes this stunning sound. But it's the sound that literally, as you poured it there, as if you just listened. And I just love, they're the things I absolutely love about Irish whiskey. And when we were earlier on, when we talked about the stories, is like these things, I'm learning new stories every day about our whiskies. But I'm loving the fact that there's now stories about Pearse whiskey. I love the stories about the Liberties whiskies. I love the stories that they're about Dingle whiskey. We're creating all these new stories, and it's so beautiful to be involved in that kind of industry. And you know, when the people come along behind us and they remember Michael Carr and the other Michael Carr, they'll be talking about these stories like they're legends, you know. And that's my thing about the stories.
Should we move on to our last and final question?
Let's do it.
All right, what are we drinking?
We're drinking Town Branch Rye. You got the new bottle, I have the old bottle.
Well, and again, I wish they would have stayed at that bottle. Like that.
Yeah,
bottle,
I like it.
That bottle is.
That's a Cowboys bottle.
Oh, and I can't wait, because I love the bourbon, so I can't wait to try the rye.
For me, I was never a massive rye fan. It took me a long time to like American whiskeys. There's a lot of flavour in American whiskeys that, like, when you're used to the subtlety of Irish whiskey, to get beyond that big rush at the start, and especially with rye whiskey. And the first time I tasted this was long before I worked with Pearse Lyons. And I think the rye content is a little bit lower than most rye whiskies. So I found it, I love that nose. It's so different.
Yeah. Honestly, like tasting this.
Big spice, but there's a freshness behind it. It's like, I really love that. And you can definitely, obviously, smell the cask, the new make barrel, or the fresh barrels, but they're not dominating. They're not there punching you in the face. I think it's a fabulous rye whiskey. It's that spice. And what's wonderful, like, Pearse has that spice. It's a similar spice, but the base flavor behind it, even though it's a similar sweetness as well, it's just totally different. And it's what, like, when if you read the tasting notes on whiskey, if you read the tasting notes on the Town Branch Rye and the Pearse, they're probably very similar, and they're totally different whiskies. It just shows that tasting something side by side is the ultimate way to kind of explore whiskey.
Oh, absolutely. And too, like, I mean, right now you guys are cleaning up on the awards. Like, you're just winning awards left and right, which, again, congratulations.
That's all down to Connor. The man is a fucking genius.
But also, I mean, here, like, this should be winning awards. Like, this should be, like, people should know what a Town Branch is.
I wonder if we're getting it into the right hands as far as bartenders go. But, like, I have no knowledge of the business in America. I'm sure they're trying, but there's so many fucking amazing whiskeys in America. So, you know, I know we're part of, you know, something really, really special and something really, really beautiful, but we probably, and we definitely don't have the budgets of the big players, you know, and that's fine. That's cool.
No,
Like, I have a feeling with all of our whiskeys. I can see it even before all this stuff happened in the bar trade in Dublin. I could see it with the bartenders who are coming around to, like, our gins, our whiskies. Like, nothing gets released that isn't exactly how we want it to be. And that is, like, that's a credit to the company. They don't release crap. It's just not going to happen. Like, even when we had the opportunity to release a 3-year-old from the distillery, it was just like, no, it's not ready. Right, will we move on to the last question?
Yeah, last question. All right. So.
Wait now. I have to put some more in.
All right, hang on. I will do the same because it was magnificent.
It's beautiful.
Oh.
So fresh.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers. This has been such a pleasure.
All right. So, question 5.
Okay.
Not even midnight yet. I don't think. No, it's only 11 time. So we're good. So
we're good.
It's a flip of the coin question. So you take the Whiskey Wednesday coin, flip the coin. You can flip it, you can spin it, you can do whatever you want. The coin will give us the answer.
Okay.
All right. So, question 5. Do you deny Commons paternity?
Fuck no.
You are the father.
I knew it. I knew it.
I was a 10-year-old. It was a heady time.
Yeah.
The 80s were hard. I was a mod. You know, we all know now.
So you are the father. Congratulations.
I am the father, and to Michael Cowman's father. What a night.
Michael Carr, thank you so much for joining us. 5 drinks till midnight. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure. It's just been an absolute laugh. And look, I'm very proud to be Michael Cameron's dad.
Yeah. And until we can drink in person. So, cheers.